Well, Nova Scotia is one step closer to seeing windmills installed off our coasts. Just last week, the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Energy Regulator announced that several wind energy companies from around the world are interested in Nova Scotia. And they've qualified to bid on future offshore seabed licenses that would be part of the province's proposed Wind West energy project. Marco McLeod is Nova Scotia's Minister of Energy. Good morning, Minister.
Good morning, Preston. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate your time on this. How big a deal is this for Nova Scotia to get to this stage?
This is incredible. We've talked about offshore wind for years, and we're finally here. It's really a generational opportunity for us and can really put us on a new track for prosperity in our province.
Now, if you go to the map, you can see that the province has already chosen locations for wind development off the coast. They're pretty far offshore, aren't they? For our audience, describe where those sites are in relation to land.
Yeah, that's a great point. So there's four wind energy areas. These are areas selected for our call for bids, and they weren't picked willy-nilly. They were picked where we work with Department of Fisheries and Oceans. So they're areas where there's low fishing intensity and where data showed there's low catches. So they're best suited for wind turbines. And there's one area just off of Cape Breton, off Sydney, 25 kilometers out. There's a 25-kilometer buffer zone to not impact inshore fisheries. And then we have three areas basically between the eastern shore, so like Guysborough County and Sable Island, if you will. These are big areas. They're the size of Pictou and Antigonish County combined, if not a bit larger.
They're really big. The map I'm looking at shows four sections off the coast. You're saying there are three. Are there now three?
There is one off Cape Breton called Sydney Bight.
Yeah.
And there are three kind of between Guysborough and Sable Island. And it's French Bank, Middle Bank, and Sable Island Bank.
Okay. There will be some major investment in subsea cables and online transmission lines to accommodate the energy from the turbines to get them to customers here. Who's going to pay for that?
It is it's big money, Preston. So the first phase is up to 5 gigawatts of development. So that'd be between $45 and $75 billion in investment and economic activity. That will be private development. Nova Scotia, as a provincial government, we're stick handling this file. We're connecting proponents with energy buyers, but it would be private investment investing their money.
Is there any basic sort of wind infrastructure that we need to provide and pay for in order to accommodate the investment and the private wind?
We've helped pay for some studies, but no, this is not a whole bunch of taxpayer money going to this. The opportunity that we are providing is literally the areas offshore.
I see. Is offshore wind going to make electricity rates higher or lower for Nova Scotian ratepayers?
So, Nova Scotia, in our peak demand in the wintertime, we use about 2.5 gigawatts. This first phase offshore is 5 gigawatts. So the target market is not Nova Scotia. The target market is Quebec and New England. For Nova Scotians, onshore wind, so land-based wind farms, that is the cheapest form of electricity. So that's where Nova Scotians will be getting their electricity, is onshore wind farms. The offshore is set to go to the Quebec market or the New England market.
At any point, will Nova Scotia be powered by the offshore wind turbines?
So how it would work is the electricity would land ashore to a substation, and then it would likely go subsea cable to those other jurisdictions. When we get to that point, that's a lot of electricity flowing to our coast. So there's definitely opportunity there to use some of that electricity. The real benefit to Nova Scotians is all the jobs this creates. 5 gigawatts would would be 5,000 jobs during construction, operations and maintenance jobs, and then using our ports again, our wonderful deep sea ports, ice-free harbors for laydown and marshalling areas, manufacturing. I mean, the components of these wind turbines are simply enormous, and it takes a lot of manufacturing know-how.
Right. The job component, no doubt, is appealing to Nova Scotians. I'd say Nova Scotians also want to get in on the green energy, especially if it's going to be cheaper and replace fossil fuel burning like coal. And you said that our power will come from land-based wind. When we get to this sort of optimum point, how much of our energy will be supplied by those land-based wind turbines?
So our target is 80% renewables by the end of 2030, and that will mostly be onshore wind in Nova Scotia. It is the cheapest form of electricity. Just the logistics of building onshore make it a lot more affordable. So that's what we want for Nova Scotians. We want affordable electricity.
Yeah. Is there any chance that Nova Scotian ratepayers may be subsidizing power rates for non-Nova Scotians once we get this scaled up and running?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Now, the Premier has said he'd like the federal government to make Wind West, quote, a project of national interest. The he's also asked Ottawa for federal investment, tax credits, and Canada infrastructure bank loans. And the federal government says it needs to see the private sector's interest. Where are we at with that now, given these expressions of interest, and how confident are you that Wind West will now get off the ground?
So to become a project of national interest, you need a proponent. So that would happen at the call for bid stage when a proponent puts down money to get an offshore land lease. At that point, it can become a project of national interest.
Okay. What is the timeline here, Minister? When will the power from the first turbines start moving?
Early 2030s to mid-2030s. So our target date right now that we're working with is 2032, 2033. And the most recent milestone is we just had the pre-qualification stage. So there was 7 companies or groups that have pre-qualified for this, and the call for bids will happen before the end of the year.
All right, the call for bids. That is the next step then? Once we get the bids, what happens after that?
After that, well, you'll see activity begin. So you'll see a lot of these companies are European, and there's actually some Canadian companies as well, and they'll start scouting out areas. So looking at our ports and harbors for laydown areas for them to start staging their components so that they can bring them offshore and install them.
The Premier's talked a lot about making Nova Scotia a green powerhouse. But this spring, the Premier met with petroleum companies in Texas and Alberta, and they talked about the province's offshore gas potential. Do you think the Premier's push for this fossil fuel production strays from the green ideals of Wind West?
Absolutely not. It's a big ocean there, and there's lots of room for coexistence. So there's room for our valuable fisheries. There's room for offshore oil and gas, and there's definitely room out there for offshore wind. So I say, hey, why not go for all three?
When will the actual drilling and exploration begin for any potential shale gas onshore?
So Dalhousie University, they're leading a research project, and they'll be working with a successful drilling company, and that will likely happen next year.
All right, you've got when you say it'll happen next year, you mean the actual exploration?
Yeah, the research project where there would be drilling activity.
All right, Minister, thanks for your time.
Really appreciate you having me on, Preston. Have a great weekend.
You too. Marco McLeod is Nova Scotia's Minister of Energy. And now over to you. What are your thoughts on the Wind West project? Call us at 1-800-582-5526, or you can email us at infomorning.halifax@cbc.ca.